I was about to sign my daughter's birth certificate, smiling like a fool, when one small detail made my hand shake, and I knew I needed answers before the ink touched paper. Before we continue, thank you so much for your support. Every like, comment, and view means the world to us. We're on a mission to reach our first 1,000 subscribers, and we'd love for you to be part of that journey. If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and let's grow together. Now, let's proceed. The room smelled like disinfectant and warm linen, and somehow even the machine seemed to breathe with me, rising and falling in a rhythm that made me feel like I could finally exhale. I stood beside the bassinet, staring at the tiniest fingers I had ever seen. Her hand opened and closed like a new star blinking on, and every plan I ever made rearranged itself around that small, stubborn fist. "She's perfect," the nurse said, and I nodded because there are moments when language is too small for what your chest is doing. I reached for the pen sitting on the clipboard, the one that would make everything official, and then, I don't know why, I told myself I should see her one more time before I signed. Not for proof, for gratitude, for all. I slipped back to the nursery window, expecting another quiet wave of wonder. Instead, I got a jab of static somewhere behind my ribs. The bassinet had a little plastic card at the head, last names, time of birth, a 4-digit code. I remembered the code from earlier because I memorize numbers when I'm nervous. It helps me feel like I can hold the world steady. This time, the digits on the card matched the bracelet on my fiancé's wrist, but the small barcode sticker on the bassinet rail was different. Maybe they changed it, I told myself. Maybe the nurse swapped out security tags. Hospitals shuffle details. I should have walked away right then and spared myself the next thought, but I didn't. I leaned closer to the glass and saw a volunteer wheeling a cart of folded blankets, and when she parked, the card at the head of our bassinet flipped just enough to flash the back. Another sticker, another tiny mismatch. A small thing, a nothing thing, but it stuck to me. The same way a kernel of popcorn lodges in your teeth and turns into an empire. I touched the window with my knuckles and watched my reflection ripple. "You're doing it again," I told myself. Overthinking, seeing patterns and static. I'd been steady all morning. Cut cords, held hands, whispered jokes at the right times. But the clipboard's legal language had thrown me off earlier. Voluntary acknowledgement of paternity. Read before signing. This is a legal document. I'd skimmed that sentence and felt a door shut deep in the building. Now, with the barcode mismatch buzzing like a fruit fly, I thought about every red flag I'd folded into origami over the last year and called a crane. Her phone face down at dinner with the corner lit up under her palm, and the fast swipe to black. A weekend girls' trip, where her location pinged at a town that wasn't on the itinerary. The way she'd snapped at me for asking about the due date, then calmed down and said she was just overwhelmed. None of it proved anything. I hated that my brain was pulling on threads while a miracle slept 5 feet away. The nurse in pink scrubs walked by with a cart full of forms, and I raised a hand to wave like a normal, happy father. Instead, I heard myself ask if the numbers on the infant tag and the maternal bracelet always matched. "Most of the time," she said, cheerful and unconcerned. "Sometimes we reprint if something smudges." Smudges. That made sense. It should have soothed me. It didn't. I went back to our room where my fiancée was half asleep, hair plastered to her forehead, a queen after battle. I loved her in that instant, purely, uncomplicatedly, as if love were a clean white sheet you could pull fresh from a warmer. "They said you can sign now," she murmured. I still shut. The clipboard waited by the sink, the pen clipped to a blue string like a dog on a short leash. I stared at the signature line and, unhelpfully, imagined ink moving like a fuse. Once lit, you don't get to snuff it out. I put the pen down, picked it up, put it down again. "I want to see her one more time," I said, and my voice sounded gentle enough to pass. She smiled without opening her eyes. "Go," she whispered. "Bring me a picture." On the way out, I paused at the family lounge and grabbed a bottle of water I didn't open. A TV in the corner looped a commercial about new parents, all soft focus and warm guitars. I watched a man my age kiss his infant's forehead, then write a name in bold, confident strokes. I thought of names. The one we'd chosen. The one I had tested in my mouth in the shower. The one that would be printed on tiny socks. I thought of my father's watch in my pocket, the one he told me to pass down on the day I became someone's dad. I thought of duty and grace and the small, private vows a man makes when the room is empty and nobody is grading him. Then I thought of being wrong. Spectacularly, publicly wrong, and having to claw my way back through a web of signatures to the place where the truth lives. The nursery window didn't give me any more answers the second time, just a replay of the same uneasy loop. The barcode, the sticker, a card that didn't sit quite straight. A volunteer who moved things with the casual competence of someone who doesn't imagine strangers trying to read meaning into every nudge. Behind the glass, my would-be daughter fussed. I felt that noise in the center of my chest and had to bite the inside of my cheek not to cry. I wasn't a man who cried in public. I was a man who solved problems. I took out my phone, opened the camera, and took a picture of the bassinet tag, the sticker, the bracelet on my fiancé's wrist from earlier. Not to prove anyone wrong. To prove myself sane later if I needed to. Then I walked, slowly, deliberately, back to our room and set the phone face down on the tray. My fiancée opened her eyes when I came in and saw the pen still leashed to the clipboard. Her smile thinned. "Everything okay?" she asked, like you ask when you already know something is off and you'd rather have the lie. "I want to do something first," I said. The words felt like stepping onto ice that might hold you or might crack loud enough to wake the whole lake. "Before I sign, I want a DNA test." The sentence landed between us like a tray of instruments, metal on metal, sterile and loud. For a long beat, she didn't say anything. The clock on the monitor counted heartbeats that I couldn't see. Then she laughed, too sharp. "You're joking." I shook my head. "I'm not." She swallowed. "Because of what?" "Because it's a legal document," I said, and I kept my voice even, the way you do with a skittish horse. "Because I want certainty. Because I'm going to be her father for the rest of my life if I sign, and that deserves the truth." Her mouth worked like she was choosing from a menu of reactions, and none of them tasted good. "You're insulting me," she whispered finally, and the whisper hurt more than a shout. "After everything I just did, I'm asking for clarity," I said. "Not a fight." She blinked fast and looked at the pen again, then at the window, then back at me like I was an incision that had opened. I wanted to tell her about the barcode, the sticker, the legal line about voluntary acknowledgement. I wanted to say, "Help me over this ridge," and be carried into the light, forgiven for my fear by the simple weight of her hand in mine. Instead, we sat there, a new kind of silence opening between us, and I felt the shape of the next hours clicking into place. Nurses called, forms requested, a hospital policy explained, a mother-in-law reaching for her phone to add gasoline. I picked up the pen, uncapped it, and then laid it carefully on the tray, like returning a scalpel to the nurse's palm. "I'll sign when the test is done," I said. The decision went through me like cool water after a fever. For the first time all day, my hands stopped shaking. Outside, a cart squeaked by. Inside, a monitor beeped something cheerful. My fiancée turned her face to the wall and closed her eyes in a way that said she would not look at me again for a very long time. I stood by the window and watched the late afternoon light edge across the floor tiles, and I understood that I hadn't just paused a signature. I had pressed my finger against a set of dominoes I couldn't untopple. Whatever the truth was, I was going to meet it standing up. The charge nurse came in with a clipboard of her own, and for a second I felt like a defendant being handed options: plea, trial, or walk away and let the system decide. She spoke softly, a professional who had seen love and panic mix into something volatile. "Hospital policy," she explained, "didn't require me to sign anything today. If I wanted a chain of custody DNA test, they could swab mother, child, and alleged father before discharge, seal the samples, and send them to a certified lab." My fiancée stared at the ceiling, lips pressed thin. Her mother arrived with the force of a fresh weather system, perfume and disapproval first. "After all my daughter went through," she said. and I let the words drift past like rain on good glass. I asked the nurse for the forms, read every line, and initialed where the chain of custody needed my name to be clean. They rolled the bassinet closer for the identification check. I read out loud the numbers on my fiancé's bracelet, the baby's foot tag, the card on the bassinet, then asked for the barcode rail to be replaced so every identifier aligned. The nurse nodded, swapped the label, and double-checked each aloud with that calm rhythm people use when defusing a bomb. I bent over the bassinet, and the baby made a sound like a small violin tuning itself. I know. I whispered, more to myself than to her. Truth first. I kissed my index finger and touched the air above her blanket like a man blessing bread at a table he wasn't sure he'd be invited to again. Then they swabbed my cheek, labeled the tube, and sealed it in a tamper-evident bag that clicked shut with a tidy finality I wished I could borrow for my life. When the nurse left, silence swelled. My fiancée turned her head toward me and chose a Kinderregister. Please, she said, the word coming out like a folded paper bird. We can do this later. Just sign now and we'll handle the rest at home. I thought of all the times I had chosen later, then watched later rot into never. I kept my voice level. If I sign, I'm saying I know. I don't know. I will soon. She flinched as if I'd snapped. Do you know what you're accusing me of? I didn't say the word. I didn't have to. Accusations are loud even when you whisper them by doing nothing. I told her I would stay the night, change diapers, hold the baby so she could sleep. I told her I would not sign. I set my phone to record and narrated the identifiers and the test request into a voice memo, time and date for a future that might need receipts. Down in the cafeteria, the world returned to ordinary. Coffee lids, plastic forks, a television offering ball scores nobody in the room was watching. I stared at a stale muffin I didn't eat and made small, practical moves. I moved our shared savings into an individual account I'd had since college, leaving enough to cover her immediate expenses without giving anyone a reason to call me cruel. I paused all wedding vendor auto payments tied to my card with polite emails that said medical delay, uncertain new date, and I archived the confirmations in a folder called Hold. Not revenge, just an umbrella before rain. I texted my best friend a sentence that would make sense later. I need you to keep your phone on. I'm okay. Don't call. Then I walked the long loop of the hallway twice, came back upstairs, and took the night shift in a vinyl recliner that sounded like thunder every time I moved. The swabs came back from the lab courier like evidence in a courtroom drama. Sealed, barcode, logged. The technician verified our IDs, scanned the baby's tag, and swabbed the inside of her cheek with a wand so gentle it felt like a lie. My fiancée stared at the wall and asked if this would hurt her milk supply. The tech said no and kept working like a pilot talking through turbulence. Forms signed, custody sealed, the bag disappeared into the courier's lockbox. Results in 48 to 72 hours, business days, depending on volume. The math of it felt insulting, like telling a drowning man how many ounces are in the pool. I wrote the case number on my palm with a pen, then on the inside cover of my notebook, then took a picture of both. Redundancy is a way to pretend you're in control. Sometimes it's also how you survive. Waiting was a new kind of noise. Family texted congratulations in a burst of exclamation points. Her mother posted a picture. No faces, just tiny fingers wrapped around a hospital-issue knit cap, and tagged me with a caption that read "Welcome to Fatherhood." I didn't correct her. I went to settings and turned off notifications. Then I opened the calendar app and counted backward with cold, accountant fingers. The girls' trip, weekend that pinged a different city. The party I left early where she stayed late with an old friend whose name suddenly floated like a bright, poisonous fish to the top of the bowl. I didn't accuse, I aligned. Dates, places, receipts. I thought of my father's watch again and wondered what stories get trapped in metal when we pass it from wrist to wrist. At 3 a.m, the baby hiccuped like a tiny engine, and I got up and walked her until the sound disappeared into sleep. On the third afternoon, a courier arrived with the envelope like a man bringing weather. I took it into the empty family lounge and sat in a chair that wobbled. I looked at the glue line and thought about all the seals I was about to break. Promises, plans, the neat story we sell ourselves about who we are and what we deserve. I slid a finger under the flap and opened it without drama. Numbers lined up in black on white, clinical as a ledger. Probability of paternity, 0%. The zeros felt obscene in their simplicity. A period after two empty eyes. I didn't feel heat or lightning or any of the things movies promise. I felt the thermostat in the room click and the faintest smell of coffee from somewhere I couldn't see. I took a photo of the report, emailed a PDF copy to myself and my lawyer. Yes, my lawyer now, because the future deserved representation, and slipped the original back into its sleeve. I walked into our room with the envelope at my side like a diplomatic pouch. My fiancée was propped up in bed, hair braided by a nurse with kind hands, the baby on her chest in a way that made the world quiet. For a second, I almost turned around and chose the lie. I set the envelope on the tray table instead. "The results are back," I said, and the word results did the work of 100 other words I didn't say. She looked at the envelope as if it might bite. "And?" she asked, voice small. "It says I'm not the father." A sound came out of her that wasn't grief and wasn't surprise. It was the sound of a shelf giving way under too much weight. She put a hand over her mouth and shook her head like she could rattle the answer she wanted loose from a tree. "They're wrong," she said, but it was an echo, not a belief. I didn't argue. I slid the report closer and let the numbers be the bad guy. Her mother arrived mid-storm and reached for rage like it was her favorite coat. "This is humiliation," she said, glaring at me, at the nurse, at the ceiling. "You've stressed my daughter into sickness." I let her words spin themselves. Then I spoke quietly enough that she had to lean in. "I won't be signing the acknowledgement of paternity," I said, naming the form like a spell that closes a door. "I will cover the hospital bill because I said I would, and because none of this is the baby's fault. After discharge, I'll have my things moved. I'll send you both an email outlining logistics. There won't be a scene." She opened her mouth to make one anyway, but the nurse was there with her clipboard of neutrality and a reminder about rest and discharge protocols and the peace of other patients. The room settled into a wary truce. I stood by the window and counted 8 slow breaths. That night, I wrote my email like a contract with myself. No insults, no history lessons, no autopsy of love. Just facts. I attached the report. I listed next steps. Key return, lease transition options, a date for retrieving anything legally mine that I didn't want movers touching, the vendor payments on pause, the ring appraised value, and the terms of transfer back to the jeweler pending cancellation. I explained that I would not discuss this over the phone or in DMs. Everything in writing. Everything time-stamped. Then I closed the laptop, held the baby for an hour while my fiancée slept in thin, wet breaths, and whispered the stupid, tender things you say to a person who has no idea anyone is speaking at all. Whatever else I wasn't, I could be kind to someone new. By morning, the corridor smelled like coffee and lemon cleaner again, the same way it had the day I walked in believing I could sign my name and anchor a story to the page. Discharge papers shuffled. A volunteer wheeled in a chair. My fiancée avoided my eyes and signed where she needed to. I carried the car seat to the curb like a man ferrying something holy he wasn't allowed to touch. When the town car pulled up, I kissed my palm again and pressed it to the air over the baby's cap. My fiancée looked at me once, a look that held 1,000 apologies she couldn't say and 100 accusations she wanted to. I nodded, acknowledgement, not agreement. The car door shut. The day resumed. I didn't sign. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, and not because I'm immune to weakness, but because a signature should mean what it says, that a man knows. Knowing had come wrapped in paper and ink, quiet and absolute. I kept the envelope under my arm and walked to the parking garage where my reflection in the windshield looked like a man stepping out of one life and into another. The clean exit would come next. The quiet parts that look small from the outside and feel like earthquakes when you live them. I turned the key, sat for a beat with my hands on the wheel, and told the empty car the truth out loud so I could hear it bounce back. This is where I begin again. I kept it simple. First stop, the jeweler. The ring contract had a return window. I arrived with the appraisal, the receipt, and a quiet face. The clerk slid the refund across the counter without ceremony. That money went straight into a trust I'd set up that morning, beneficiary. Future child, TBD. Not hers. Not mine. Just the life I still hoped to meet one day with a clean name. Next, vendors. Because I'd paused auto payments, cancellations were clicks, not battles. Venue. Released. Catering. Refunded minus a small fee. Photographer. Credit note applied to any future event. I archived every confirmation in a folder labeled closed. It felt like sweeping glass into a pan. Small, careful motions, no drama. At the apartment, I packed fast. 2 suitcases, the watch from my father, the plant that somehow survived our neglect. Keys on the counter. Authorized user cards cut in half and left in a plain envelope with a copy of the lab report. No speeches. On the dining table, I placed the ring return slip, the vendor receipts, and a final, 1-page letter. I wouldn't be signing the acknowledgement of paternity. I wouldn't be discussing this by phone. For any dispute, have counsel email mine. Clean, signed, dated. 1 kindness. A week of groceries in the fridge and a box of newborn essentials by the door. Not hush money, decency. I called the landlord and removed my name from the lease extension she'd asked me to sign last month. He understood. Paperwork followed. When her mother texted a paragraph of flames, I replied with a single line. Please direct all communication to counsel attached. Then I silenced the thread and let the law hold the noise. There was one message I did send myself, and it was the only sharp edge I allowed. I forwarded the results to the old friend whose name kept showing up when I counted backward. No threat, no performance, just the PDF and 2 sentences. You have responsibilities. Handle them. Then I archived him with the others. Before I left town, I stopped at the hospital's foundation office and made a donation in honor of the floor that held us. A small plaque, no names, just for the ones who arrived telling the truth. It wasn't revenge. It was a way to leave something honest where the lie had begun. I drove east until the city unwound. At the first turnout, I stepped out with my father's watch in my palm and said the words I hadn't let myself say in the room. I was relieved. Not because I wanted to be free of a child. I had walked those halls ready to be a father, but because the truth had given me back my future. I messaged my lawyer to file the final notices, set my phone down, and watched a slow line of cars move like a second chance. By nightfall, everything that needed ending was ended. No posts, no rants, no revenge that spilled past its target and hit the innocent. Just a door, closed gently, and the steady knowledge that I hadn't signed a life I couldn't live. When the screen finally lit up again, it was a calendar reminder I'd set years ago without thinking. Anniversary dinner. I deleted it, added a new one, and titled it Begin Again. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and help us reach our first 1,000 subscribers. Your support means the world to us.